My first ever writers conference. Today I wanted to share a little bit about my first writers conference experience from last year when I went to ACFW for the first time. As a young writer, having no idea what writers conferences were, and just knowing after a little while that I should be going to them, I finally booked my registration for ACFW after a little bit of research. That was nerve-wracking in itself. I booked late, and then I picked out agent appointments and editor appointments. To start, I had no idea what either of those were. I had no idea what the difference were, what either one meant. I just decided to split the difference, since I got 2 appointments, that I would pick 1 agent and 1 editor. And then I kind of just had to wait, because I registered pretty early on in the spring, and then the conference was early September. So when the conference season actually came around, my mom and I packed up and we headed to St. Louis. I had actually just gone skydiving for the first time, so I was kind of on a high of like, if I can jump off a plane 14,000 feet in the air, I can go into a writer's conference and be confident and brave. I think it was a little bit more scary to go to the writers' conference than to jump off the plane. I mean, I've been looking forward to jumping off the plane ever since I was pretty little, and it was exciting and adrenaline-filled, whereas going into the writers' conference, I didn't freak out, but I was rather nervous. I was like, I don't know anyone here. I'm alone. I'm barely 19. I have never done anything like this before. I have no idea what to expect, and I really wanted it to go well. I also really wanted to present myself as a confident adult, so my mom wasn't going to come with me. She was going to visit museums and art places all around St. Louis, and I was going to do the writers' conference. So she dropped me off at the valet parking, and then I went up, and I had no idea where registration was. So I stood in line at the wrong thing for a couple minutes, and then I found people with ACFW name tags, and so I asked them, and they directed me, which was super helpful and kind. And after I got registered, I got a whole bag full of different notes and conference booklets and my schedule for the week, and it was just slightly overwhelming. So I found a corner in the hotel, and I just sat down, and I was just sorting through everything, trying to figure it out. That's when I found out who my pitch appointments were with, and that was cool to see, and it kind of made me slightly nervous. But it was also really cool because I realized the 2 people I'd be pitching to were actually the 2 panels that I had signed up for that night. It just felt like a really neat God moment that the 2 panels that I had signed up for had the people I'd be pitching for. I mean, what are the chances? So as I was sitting there, I just was glancing around the room, and I noticed a lady with blonde hair that I felt like I recognized, but I wasn't too sure. I didn't really want to stare, but I finally made up the courage, and I introduced myself to her. Turns out it was Tara Johnson, who actually did my critique for the conference. So she had read a couple of my chapters and my synopsis and given me some pointers on it, and we had a call beforehand. So I just felt like it was so neat that she was like the first person that I actually met, and she just was so sweet and welcoming and warm. So we ended up chatting for a little while. She was with a friend, and they were chatting about titles and agents and contracts and things like that, and it just felt really neat to me, who had never been a part of this industry and never been in this world, to just hear them talking about their agents and about their book deals and their contracts, and it just felt like I was in a whole different world, and I really liked it. Around that time, the first timers session had started, so I hurried off, even though I kind of wanted to stay and just listen to their conversation. And that's when we started the conference, and that was my first ever session at ACFW. Kara Putnam did the session with her agent, and they shared some tips for the conference, for sessions, for pitch appointments, and it was just a really neat time. Around lunchtime, we all went into the main room, and I had no idea where to sit, who anyone was, so I was kind of just trying to figure it out. I was kind of just standing in the back, surveying the room, when a sweet lady asked me if I wanted to sit next to her. She said her name was Liz Johnson, and we started chatting a little bit. I had no idea who she was, and then when I got home, I realized, oh, I have one of her books on my bookshelf, and I was like, what a coincidence, so cool. It's really neat at writers' conferences because you bump into so many people. A ton of the people are not published, and you've never heard of them, but they're super kind and super sweet. But every once in a while, you'll find an author that you recognize or that you don't recognize, because the thing about books is that you don't recognize faces of the authors. So it was super sweet to bump into random authors that are on my bookshelf and be like, wow, I had no idea that you were going to be here, and I had no idea who you were until I got home and started looking at my bookshelf and recognized names. So after they had lunch, we did a worship session, and Liz Curtis Higgs was going to come up and speak. And just as she was getting on stage and getting oriented, a gentleman behind me asked if the seat was open. Liz had left for something, and the seat was open, and I turned around and I was like, that is Steve Lobby. And that was a really neat moment for me because he is the head of Enclave Publishing and he also runs Steve Lobby Agency. And I've interacted with him a bit through the Author Conservatory and I just really admire him as an agent and as an editor. And I was kind of just like, whoa, this is the only person I know that's affiliated with the Author Conservatory that's actually here. And it just felt like such a God moment that he took the only seat left in the room and it was right next to me. And so afterwards we chatted a little bit and it was just really awesome to actually meet him in person. From there on out, my hours were filled with tons of different sessions and chats with different authors. It was just really neat to meet all sorts of people and get to network and just see who was there. And there were just so many people to learn from, whether it was agents or published authors or just writers who had not been published but had a lot of knowledge under their belts, and it was just really neat to network with everyone. And then on my second day, I had my first ever pitch appointment. What an experience. I will share more about that in a separate video where I'll share a story time of my first ever pitch appointments. They were just such neat stories of how God worked and how he worked through different people, and it was just such an amazing experience. And then on the last night was the big ACF gala, so it was super fun to get all dressed up and glammed up in a really fancy evening gown and do my makeup and do my hair and get all fancy. And then we went to this fancy dinner and they did the awards ceremony. So this was for the Genesis Awards and a variety of different awards, and it was just super neat to see all of the authors that were being honored that evening, and it was just so inspiring to me as an unpublished and really excited, enthusiastic young author to see how these authors had gone through their journey, and just it was just so inspiring to me. And then after that, since my mom and I did not want to spend another $100 at a hotel for that evening because there was nothing going on Sunday, we decided to drive home from St. Louis to Tennessee. And it was like a 5 or 6 hour drive, and the gala did not go early. So, needless to say, we were driving very late into the night, and it was kind of exhausting, and it was quite the adventure. Overall, my first time at ACFW was such a neat experience. I just really loved meeting all these people and getting to network and just see what life was actually like in the industry. I felt like such a baby writer in that moment. Like, I've written a ton of books, but I've never been to a writer's conference. I've never been in a place where I could talk about my writing in such a way that felt so natural because all these other people are crazy writers too. So it was just such a neat experience. I'm really, really looking forward to going back to ACFW in just a couple of weeks for my second writers conference. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about writing and different writing tips and what writing conferences are, hear more about my writing journey, make sure to subscribe and then drop a comment if you've ever gone to a writer's conference. What was your favorite thing about it? What was one cool author that you got to meet? I'd love to connect with you more there, and until then, have a great weekend and I cannot wait to see you next week.